brings the Screen News Digest, a chapter of living history, into your classroom. The place, an undisclosed American air base somewhere in the Western Hemisphere. The time, a Monday morning in mid-October 1962. The mission, a routine aerial reconnaissance flight over Cuba. A routine flight at takeoff, but a mission that will touch off the gravest crisis, the greatest threat to world peace in more than a decade. The cameraman winging high over the Cuban countryside does not and cannot know what he has photographed, what he has brought back. Hours will pass before the negatives, hundreds of them, can be developed, processed, reproduced, and enlarged. The photo interpreter, he is the one, the expert whose trained mind, skilled eyes will survey the pictures, analyze them, compare and evaluate them, and then make the final, fateful report. A report that will trigger action and expression in a single 6-letter word. Crisis. The word suddenly springs alive, ominously in the newspapers across America on Monday afternoon, October 22nd. Headlines alert millions of Americans to an air of unusual activity and tension in Washington, to the momentous announcement that President...
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. Only last Thursday, as evidence of this rapid offensive buildup was already in my hand, Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko told me in my office that he was instructed to make it clear once again, as he said his government had already done, that Soviet assistance to Cuba, and I quote, pursued solely the purpose of contributing to the defense capabilities of Cuba, unquote. That, and I quote him, training by Soviet specialists of Cuban nationals in handling defensive armaments was by no means offensive. And that if it were otherwise, Mr. Gromyko went on, the Soviet government would never become involved in rendering such assistance, unquote. That statement also was...
The threat is known. Action has been taken. The crisis is begun. And the people of America begin 7 days of watching, waiting, wondering, hoping. At sea, warships of the Atlantic Fleet move swiftly, surely, to carry out the quarantine of Cuba. Jet fighters are ordered into the air to find and follow some 25 Russian ships known to be headed for Cuba. The fleet is under specific orders to stop and search any vessel believed to be carrying offensive military equipment to the communist island. They shall not pass. The Kremlin, Tuesday, the second day of crisis. Reaction at last from Moscow. The American quarantine of Cuba is denounced as 20th century piracy. But the Kremlin does not threaten to fight, And the denunciation, as Russian denunciations go, is surprisingly mild. In Cuba, the flames of crisis burn far stronger, far higher, fed and fanned by the bitter tirades of Fidel Castro, who hurls the well-worn communist invectives of imperialist, aggressor, provocateur against the United States. Cuba, already a red military outpost, mobilizes every able-bodied man and woman with arms provided by communist bloc nations. The Caribbean island, whose ties with the United States go all the way back to the time of Columbus, has now become its enemy, possessing the offensive weapons to deliver in 2 minutes thermonuclear destruction on targets ranging from the Panama Canal to Hudson Bay. In this time of crisis, lights burn late at the White House as President Kennedy meets continually with his advisors. Quarantine is translated into an official proclamation fixing the 0 hour, 10 a.m., New York time, Wednesday, October 24th. It is signed John Fitzgerald Kennedy. In the skies over Cuba, American reconnaissance planes sweep back and forth, and their pictures tell a sinister story. Construction work on missile bases is now going ahead 24 hours a day. Military officials weigh the findings, calculate the risks, and then decide on a further military buildup. Within hours, it has begun. The massing of men and material at bases strung out along the southern coast of Florida, many of them less than 100 miles from Cuba. There is talk of invasion, but few know what America will do, how far she will go to protect and defend the freedom and security of her people. And those who do know will not say. They keep their silence as the build-up continues. Guantanamo Naval Base in Cuba echoes endlessly to the drone of military transport planes shuttling from the mainland to the island, bringing in reinforcements by the hundreds, by the thousands, to fight, if necessary, to hold the strategically important military base. Wednesday, the third day. Mankind teeters precariously on the brink of a thermonuclear war, waiting hour by hour, minute by minute, for the final moment of truth, when American determination meets Russian defiance, and the world discovers whether the answer will be war or peace. At the United Nations on Thursday, the fourth day of crisis, the conflict is carried on among the diplomats of the world. Here in this political forum, representatives of each of the nations involved in the global dispute are given the opportunity to hear and be heard, nation against nation, face to face, in dramatic confrontation.
I have asked for an emergency meeting of the Security Council to bring to your attention a grave threat to the Western Hemisphere and to the peace of the world. We now know that the Soviet Union, not content with Dr. Castro's oath of fealty, not content with the destruction of Cuban independence, not content with the extension of Soviet power into the Western Hemisphere, not content with a challenge to the inter-American system and to the United Nations Charter, has decided to transform Cuba into a base for communist aggression, into a base for putting all of the Americas under the nuclear gun, and thereby to intensify the Soviet diplomacy of blackmail in every part of the world.
As Americans listen and watch, Ambassador Stevenson challenged.
Don't wait for the translation, yes or no. If they exist, I want to know if I've understood you correctly. I should like to say
вашу речь, господин Стивен. Sir, will you please continue your statement? You will have your answer in due course.
At the United Nations, the negotiations between President and Premier meet with the approval and endorsement of representatives from all countries, as Acting Secretary General U Thant speaks.
Mr. President, today the United Nations faces a moment of grave responsibility. During the 17 years that have passed since the end of World War II, there has never been a more dangerous or closer confrontation of the major powers. I hope that at this moment, not only in the council chamber, but in the world outside, good sense and understanding will be placed above the anger of the moment or the pride of nations. The path of negotiation and compromise is the only course by which the peace of the world can be secured at this critical moment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Finally, from the Kremlin, on Sunday, the 7th day of crisis, there comes a dramatic announcement that is as welcome to the Russian people as it is to the free world. Concern, anxiety, uncertainty, they are written in every face.
Nikita Sergeyevich Khrushchev.
Khrushchev backs down and agrees to dismantle Russian rocket bases in Cuba. The crisis is ended, but the danger is not. Russia knows it, and so too does America.
Let no one doubt that this is a difficult and dangerous effort on which we have set out. No one can foresee precisely what course it will take, or what costs or casualties will be incurred. Many months of sacrifice and self-discipline lie ahead, months in which both our patience and our will be tested, months in which many threats and denunciations will keep us aware of our dangers. But the greatest danger of all would be to do nothing. The path we have chosen for the present is full of hazards, as all paths are. But it is the one most consistent with our character and courage as a nation and our commitments around the world. The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it. And one path we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender or submission. Our goal is not the victory of might, but the vindication of right. Not peace at the expense of freedom, but both peace and freedom here in this hemisphere, and we hope around the world. God willing, that goal will be achieved.
to widen your horizons, to stimulate your interest in things going on about you. Wolf and Dessauer, one of America's great department stores, has presented the Screen News Digest as a public service.